I'm Chad Douglas. Our parent company Sinclair Broadcasting and KHQA continue to work for you, keeping you informed on complex political issues facing our nation. We continue our Connect to Congress initiative with U.S. Representative Darin LaHood from Illinois' 18th District. He joins us now via satellite in Washington, D.C. Hello, Congressman LaHood.
Hello, Chad. Good to be with you and your viewers.
Glad you were here. First off, Congressman, I want to ask how the mood is on Capitol Hill this week after last week's shooting of Congressman Steve Scalise.
You know, it was a tragic week to have the shootings that occurred, and to have Whip Scalise still in the hospital, still recovering, along with another staff member and our one Capitol Hill police officer who's still in the hospital. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. And I think we saw last week a sense of unity of Republicans and Democrats coming together. An attack on one of us is really an attack on all of us. And I thought the mood was very, very good. And hopefully we can continue that mood moving forward of, coming together, Republicans and Democrats. I thought Paul Ryan, on his speech on the House floor after the shooting, set a good tone for us. But there's a lot of concern about security and what we do in the future at public events. And so I think, there's a lot of people working on that and trying to decide, whether there's other measures that can be put in place to make sure that we don't have another tragedy like this. And the last point I would make, Chad, is but for the Capitol Police, this really could have been a massacre. And those brave police officers really helped prevent a real tragedy that could have been worse last week. And so commend them and their dedication and commitment to what they did last week. Absolutely. And it's good to see unity on the Hill, but there is still politics to talk about because you guys have a lot on your plate these days. We're going to start talking that now with tax reform. Should President Trump's tax reform plan pass, what would this do or not do for folks here in the tri-states? Well, we have not had comprehensive tax reform in 30 years. And when you talk to businesses, whether they're small Main Street businesses or large businesses, comprehensive tax reform is something that people want. Currently, Chad, we have the highest corporate or business tax rate in the entire industrialized world. We're at about 36%. By way of comparison, Canada's at 22%, Ireland's at 14%. So to be competitive, we have to reduce that business and corporate tax rate and bring it down. The proposal by the president puts it at 15%. Our plan in the House puts it at 20%. We have to do that. There are literally billions and almost trillions of dollars parked overseas by corporations in Ireland and lots of other countries around the world. If we pass comprehensive tax reform, it makes us more competitive with the other countries, but it helps repatriate a lot of that money. There's some estimates that we'll bring back $2 trillion in money that's repatriated back to the United States that's parked overseas right now. The other part of this is what happens to that money when it comes back, or what happens to the money that small businesses on Main Street in Quincy save? That money goes into wages, it goes into reinvestment in the company and the business, and it goes to people that have invested in those companies. That's good for our economy. I think our economy is on the precipice of taking off. Tax reform will help do that. It's imperative that we work on that. And as you may know, Chad, all tax bills have to start in the House. We have a proposal that's going through the Ways and Means Committee now. We hopefully will get that out of the Ways and Means Committee, get it to the House floor here by the end of the year, and get it over to the Senate. All right, let's talk a little bit about Cuba now. President Trump last Friday saying now he wants to reverse a lot of what President Obama did with the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba. What are your thoughts on this, and what do you see going forward? I know there was a lot of confusion about this. Yeah, I represent a district that's one of the largest agriculture districts in the entire country. I think it's the 9th largest in terms of corn and soybean production. When you talk to our farmers, whether it's in Adams County or Peoria County or Sangamon County, they support opening up more markets for trade. And although Cuba is a small country, it's 90 miles from our southern border there from Florida, but it's a market that we've already started to break into. And why should Cuba be getting their soybeans from South America, from Brazil or other countries when they can get it from the United States? I frankly think that we need to have a broader discussion on relations with Cuba. I give the president credit for wanting to crack down on the dictatorship in Cuba and some of the human rights violations, but we have to also recognize the economic benefits. I look at Vietnam. 30 years ago, Vietnam was our arch enemy. But we passed a trade agreement with them. Now they're one of our biggest trading partners in Southeast Asia. They look to us rather than China. I think we can create that with Cuba. I think the economics and more business and more money that flows into Cuba kind of lets all boats rise. And so, I think the administration was listening a little too much to the folks in South Florida and the small Cuban population. But you look broadly at the trade opportunities, the economic opportunities, and also the tourism opportunities in Cuba. And I think there's a lot that we can do there.
Interesting. Earlier this month, the House voted on legislation to reform the VA, the Veterans Administration. Can you tell me more about this legislation, what it would do if this is passed?
Yeah, so the Veterans Administration has had a lot of trouble over the last few years. And so we passed a couple bills. The first bill really was for veterans. In our congressional district, I have the second highest number of veterans in the state of Illinois. I also have a Veterans Advisory Committee where I meet with veterans on a quarterly basis to hear about their concerns. One of the biggest things I hear from our veterans, whether it's veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan or from Vietnam or Korea, is health care. We passed a bill that basically says you have two choices now. You can either go to have VA health care, Veterans Affairs health care, or we're going to give you a tax credit to go to whatever hospital or whatever doctor you want in your own community. If it's Quincy, Illinois, or Jacksonville, or Peoria, we have lots of good health care in our local communities in Illinois. This allows veterans to be able to go to those local hospitals instead of having to go to Iowa City, sometimes, or go to Danville, Illinois, or to Indianapolis. This keeps more dollars local and gives that veteran the flexibility and the discretion. That's a positive thing. The second bill we passed is really to reform the VA, making the VA more efficient, effective, and accountable to our taxpayers and to our veterans. This allows the VA administration to make efficiencies when it comes to employees, to be able to get rid of employees, demote employees that aren't doing their job, and really treat the VA the same way you would the private sector. These are two positive steps to help our veterans, to get our VA cleaned up, and puts us on the path to making a stronger Veterans Administration. We have to remember, our veterans are the reason we have the greatest country in the world. We have to make sure we treat them the way they should be treated.
And finally, and real quickly, Congressman, what would you like to see happen before the August recess in Congress?
I think we have to focus on a couple things. I think tax reform, getting that out of the Ways and Means Committee, has to be something we get done. Secondly, infrastructure. Infrastructure is the backbone of our congressional district, whether it's our locks and dams on the Illinois and Mississippi River, whether it's potential port project, whether it's in Quincy, or our roads and bridges. Infrastructure is vital to the economic commerce of our district. And having an infrastructure bill is important, at least getting something introduced and getting a vote in the House. And then the third part is doing something about health care. We passed a bill in the House, which is a good first step, but we have to bring down the cost of health care. Premiums in our district have gone up an average of 55%, way too high. Deductibles are way too high. We have to bring relief to the American people on health care. Those are the three things we ought to work on every single day. And I've said if we're not able to get that done, we ought to think about canceling August recess to stay here to get the work that we've promised the American people we need to get done. Tax reform, infrastructure, and fixing health care.
All right, Congressman LaHood, we know you're a very busy man. We appreciate your time.